the Weekly Show with David J. Maloney.
This week, David chats with investigative journalist Scott Johnson.
And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the Weekly Show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight's show, we have the second part of my interview with investigative reporter Scott Johnson. Scott has broke some of the biggest stories on the Gulf Coast over the past 2 years. And with the drop of his most recent pieces, Crash Call Collect and Old Shell Game, he has once again brought an important issue to the public's attention. Back again after the break to chat about it all is Lagniappe investigative reporter Scott Johnson. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Is it true at some point you found yourself searching for a lawyer who simply doesn't exist?
Yeah, that's where that whole side of the story started. The patients that I spoke with recalled talking to someone named Baker. This is when I was still kind of under the impression that they were just using out-of-state law firms, which was kind of a red flag anyway. You want to use someone you want to use someone who's vested in the state. Somebody who's going to be regulated by the state they're in. Yeah, exactly. And someone you can verify is actually an lawyer. So what looked like has happened is in the past year, they've started to try and taper off any third-party lawyers that were being involved. One of the patients I spoke with said they started talking about a Baker, John Baker. And that was curious to me because I couldn't find any record of this guy. I got a business card that shows John Baker at 60 Commerce Street in Montgomery, which there's no record of that being a bona fide law office at all. John, so that question right there led to, I'm asking the state bar, do you guys have membership? I'm asking the Montgomery County bar, do you guys have membership for this guy? I called every single John Baker on the state bar directory, and they all, I got feedback from every single one of them. Just like, hey, that's not me.
I think there's like 4 or 5 lawyers named John Baker in the state, and none of them are this personalized card.
Yeah, I was like, I want to make sure. So I literally contacted every single one of them. And so I don't know if I definitely can't verify him as a lawyer. He's definitely not verified in Alabama. I don't even know if he's a lawyer at all. And I don't know if he's a real person at all. No, I've got no evidence. The patients can't talk to him. They can't get him on the phone after retaining him. So I get, trying to figure that out. I get it, his business card links him to something called Vasic Law Group up in Washington, D.C. And then I get a contingency. I obtain a contingency agreement from one of the clinics that links him to an Arizona law firm in Sterling. It's called Sterling Shield Legal out in Arizona. So just from past reporting, that's a red flag too. And Arizona, Washington, D.C. both have something in common. They allow these alternative business structures for law firms. Basically, you can have non-attorney membership vested as decision-making holders in law firms, which
in every state except those 2 areas, except for DC and Arizona, the 49 other actual states all have bar rules that say that for you to have an ownership interest in a law firm, you have to be a lawyer. And the only exception is if a lawyer is married and they die, then their wife may inherit their share, but they still, or their spouse, let's not necessarily say wife or husband. A female lawyer could pass, or even if you've got a same-sex situation, and anybody's spouse can die, and the attorney spouse can die, and the non-attorney spouse will gain an ownership interest, but I don't think they get any kind of decision-making interest because they're not a licensed attorney. And you're saying that in Arizona and D.C., Joe Blow, who doesn't have to pass the bar, can own part of a law firm and can finance advertising, marketing, all kinds of things to generate profit as a non-lawyer in a law firm.
Yes. And that's, I think Utah has some kind of provision. I'm not familiar with the hoops you have to go through in Utah. Washington, DC is actually just wide open, I believe. I think you might have to have a local attorney. And then Arizona, you have to actually go through a committee to have your firm established that way.
And this group went through some sort of type of committee like that at some point, and it was kind of an interesting hearing from what I understand, correct?
Exactly. So that when I got that contingency agreement, links it to Sterling Shield, which means that you've got a lawyer from one firm having his legal fees and contingency fees, all the revenue going out through another firm, which that's weird. And so anyway, so I'm almost like, okay, let's look into the it's called the ABS, Alternative Business Structure Committee, out in Arizona. And these ABS ownership things are weird anyway, but it was interesting to watch the meeting. They have it online. You can go watch it. Even their eyebrows are raising when they start to hear kind of the explanation of what this law firm is and what it's going to do. So appearing in that meeting is a man named Harold Dawson. He's like an Iowa attorney, just who was moving to Arizona to be, retire basically. And then you have this other attorney whose name is William Daniel Vasic, who is he is the out-of-state attorney. They've teamed up. They want to build this law firm out in Arizona. He is the non-attorney at that point, and he's teaming up with a Iowa attorney that's coming. And one of the committee members is when they approached the vote, and he said, "This sets the record for weird." We have a Florida resident, this William Vasic, who's from Florida, he says he's getting his bar license in DC, and he has a business established in Alabama already, is under the same Sterling legal name, and he's teaming up with this guy from Iowa. It's just red flags everywhere. The law firm gets authorized in a 4-3 vote, and it was very interesting and enlightening to hear that. Now, one of the things that William Vasic shares in that was also consequential. So William Vasic is 27 years old. He's a young guy. And one of the committee members actually warns him. He's like, to this older Harold Dawson, you got to be careful. You got a young attorney. You got a young guy here. You got to be very vigilant. Well, William Vasic passes the bar in November. So November 2024, he creates a Washington, D.C. law firm called Vasic Law Group, which is the law group that's on the back of John Baker's business card here in Alabama. And then, so what he shares in that ABS meeting that was really critical is talking about his resume. That he has his background in operating medical practices, and he's with this management firm called Skyrise Management, and they, a string of medical practices and et cetera. So I was wondering, that hit a light with me, because William Vasic's, one of the aspects on his resume is S Management. I didn't know what S Management was. Well, Skyrise Management. The only record of Skyrise Management I was ever able to find, I can't find a business registration anywhere. I might just not be looking in the right state, but the only bona fide listing I could find was the Better Business Bureau. Well, guess what address is listed on the Better Business Bureau?
The address from Kenner.
The address from Kenner. Suite 200 specifically. The cell phone is Planbeck's cell phone.
So it all comes back to Planbeck.
Everything comes back to Planbeck.
Being a lawyer myself, I know the laws and the ethical rules when it comes to injury cases and what's allowed and not allowed. So how are these, and I already know the answer, but again, this is for our audience, how are these entities getting away with this in Alabama, what would otherwise be an illegal or unethical practice in our state?
And maybe that's why they've capitalized in Alabama, is because again, I'm talking about towing the line. They're really not under the oversight of anybody. They're not to a point where the medical boards and medical oversight committees would be coming down on them in terms of how they're structured. There might be some avenues through that with licensing boards, but that'd be kind of peripheral. And then, even the state bar, the state bars, they over the ethics of lawyers, and how do you police or enforce actions for a member that's not your bar member. So
Now, my understanding is the Alabama bar, it has recently made some moves in that maybe as early as December, January, February, there will be some new rules that will go into effect from Alabama that will say the Alabama bar will now have the ability to force you to comply with out-of-state lawyers to comply with Alabama bar rules when you're doing anything in the state.
yeah, and they're gonna. So what I understand is that that's what the bar opinion has always been, is that you fall under the bar rules if you're practicing in Alabama. Now what they're doing in January,
but there's something new on the horizon that gives them more teeth. No.
Yeah, they're gonna make it explicit. So that's the new laws that have been approved by the Alabama Supreme Court for the professional conduct, and they're gonna spell it out, make it explicit, and basically they're gonna seek reciprocal discipline. And anything that they get, they are going to they're going to hold you accountable to Alabama standards, and then they're going to refer those decisions out to either the state bar that you're registered with or the federal bar, and you, with the hopes that those other states open up a show cause themselves or a hearing and have that lawyer explain what's going on.
What do people who get injured need to be on the lookout for based on what you've learned about this group? Because it basically sounds like they could be funneled into this racket from a bunch of different angles.
Yeah, and the biggest targets are the people who haven't been in accidents yet, who don't know how the claims process is.
Somebody who's never had a prior wreck. Because that seemingly, I will say this, that, from the people that I've spoken with, other attorneys, one consistent theme is that the clients that what we've now called defectors, the people who've defected from this group and hired actual real lawyers in our city so that they can, one, have real representation, and two, so they can get treatment that is more than this feel good stuff that you're talking about. So people who are really hurt can get really better. And they seem to be, one common theme is that these are all people who've never had a wreck before. So they don't know how it's supposed to work. So that's how they take advantage of them, right?
They've never had a wreck before. They call when their telemarketers call, they brand it as free care. Obviously the settlement with the insurance companies paying for everything, but they're branding it as free care. So they're also looking for lower income individuals. They're probably profiling based off zip codes and et cetera when they're looking through these reports. Interesting note here, and maybe this is a side rail, but Plan Beck's been in Mobile before, popped up right next to the Mobile Police Department. What they were doing, they were sending over at the time, they were just sending over an employee to go look at the traffic accidents.
Yep.
Right next door and writing down information.
And then law enforcement put a stop to that. At that point, law enforcement put a stop to that. And once they couldn't get the numbers, and a couple of TV stations did stories on it. I remember that because I was interviewed back then. So do you have an idea? You said you may have an idea as to how they are getting the information on these folks. But before I even ask that, now I think about it, there is one other common element racially, right?
Right.
Does it appear that the vast majority of the people that they're targeting are African American?
Every attorney I've spoken with who has what you call defectors, they all say guaranteed 95+%. And I mean, if not higher, are all Black African American individuals. Again, it's just they got to just be profiling based on whatever they're seeing on those traffic reports. I mean, I know of cases where, a couple of lawyers have had their legal aids called, et cetera. I think there is some scattershot in there, but I think there's some detailed targeting. And like even in housing advertising, you can't, it's against the rules a lot of times to, even advertise based on zip code, just because you can determine so much by just that number. So, they're definitely profiling people and reaching out.
This also connects to another legal loophole which your reporting broke regarding a Baldwin County, Alabama insurance consultant accused of fraud. And reading the story, it seems like they're utilizing similar legal loopholes as the RICO case. So can you tell us about that case? Because I feel that one kind of flew a little bit under the radar.
That that was really interesting because this guy is another country music star, or an aspiring country music star, but he's also a bunch of other things. He wears lots of hats, and one of those is he's a contractor, restoration contractor. He owns a called ATA Loss Consulting. So he had formed this business to go out and you basically begin storm repairs, and as a after the hurricanes, but mainly after Sally, etc. And he went out to Louisiana after their storms a couple of years back, and essentially they're what ended up coming out with that case. He was charged with first degree insurance fraud for charging over the customary rates for his services. He's overbilling on his contracting work in his spreadsheets. What is it called? Case file, something like that. I can't remember the name for it. But he so he comes out after he's been indicted and after he's going through his process that there was a couple lawsuits that emerged, and in those lawsuits he's suing Allstate. Actually, he sues a Shannara law firm, saying that they owe him a bunch of money. They owe him a bunch of money for two companies of his. One is his contracting, ATA's Loss Consulting, and another is a law firm. Oh, and they owe him legal fees for this law, which is very curious because, as you know, attorneys cannot share legal fees with non-attorneys. So, so this one business contractor is making, has two lawsuits out there claiming that he is both the contractor and the attorney, and he has a Washington D.C. firm. He is a non-attorney who is signed up to be an owner in a Washington D.C. firm with another attorney up there, and they are that picture gets really interesting because then you have a full circle kind of arrangement where you can do the work of a professional with a service provider, and then you can do the professional work of a legal services. So you've encapsulated the claim, and then you can push everything in your little universe. You can you manipulate however you would want it to be. And that's kind of a weird thing. I mean, at some point, the American Bar Association or somebody has got to address how these non-attorney owning entities interact with states that don't allow it.
Yeah, I mean, once again, we've got a law firm set up in D.C. at the center of a scandal on the Gulf Coast. What can people in need of an attorney or otherwise do to weed out these kinds of people and companies when choosing who to hire?
It's going to be obviously start at the bar, start at your local bar. And I wish people would start there, or, if you have a name in mind, then you start there. If you've seen someone's name, like there are a bunch of people advertise on billboards. If you see those names, well, you just take that name and then go to the bar, your local bar.
Well, and and the thing is, if there's advertising out there, for example, my advertising all has to go through the bar. We have to send it through an approval process. We have to send it to them. And if you see advertising, that person's a member of the bar.
Point.
Otherwise it's going to get shut down. So with this case we were just talking about, I'll ask you like I did with the IVF case. What was the thing that surprised you the most covering this particular story?
I think the most interesting thing about the case was it all looks, it was all put together so carefully, and I think they got comfortable. And that was the most interesting thing to me, is that there were so many breadcrumbs. And for people who were trying to be as discreet as possible, they did a terrible job. And a local journalist like me literally just went behind and picked up piece by piece. And I think that led to that moment where I opened, I was searching William Vasic's name in court filings in Florida. And when I opened a court filing where he had been listed on a a company called 448 Holdings that was doing some work down in Manatee, Florida. And when I connected William there, and when I opened up the 448 Holdings business registration out in Wyoming, which is weird anyway, but and I saw that address 1919. That was like, because that just closed it full circle. I knew at that point that William was a Plan Bet guy. He lives in Bradenton, Florida, where Plan Bet currently lives in Bradenton, Florida. And it was full circle from that point. I knew it's an enterprise. I don't know how you could look at this and say it's not a RICO styled.
Well, there was already one RICO case won.
Exactly.
Based on essentially what appears to be the exact same game plan, right?
Yeah. Elevated to the point where you're now in the legal world as well. But yeah, if it wasn't before, which it was, it definitely is now. And it's not only, you're not only unfair advantages. That's a point too. I mean, when you have this like universe of interworking companies, you have so many unfair advantages, but it's also ripe for people to be exploited. And their claims, they come out with a fraction of the claim that they could have come out with. They've been overbilled and overcharged.
The insurance company is getting whacked for some people who may not really be hurt. The people who are really hurt aren't getting the care that they should be getting. The people who are being represented may not be getting the compensation that they're supposed to be getting. So basically, everybody gets hurt in a different way, except for the people running the enterprise.
Right, and it's wild. Yeah, and the biggest thing is that nobody knows it's happening. The clients don't
until it happens to them, and then it's too late.
Yeah, and that the clients are going through, the patients, they don't know that the lawyer is not on their side. They don't know that the telemarketer is not on their side. At every point, there's no disclosure that these players are all playing on the same team and that you're the pawn. And yeah, in some aspects, the employees don't know that everybody's working with each other. And I've come to believe that these other law firms that had been kind of thrown into the mix, I don't think they realized when John Baker got involved that John Baker was actually, that might be why he used a pseudonym because, maybe a pseudonym, sorry. But yeah, I'm assuming that he had to use that name because he was running or managing these clinics, and now he's on the legal side, and he can't be churning up those questions with these law firms that he's been doing business with for a year, 2 years, several years. So
yep. Do you think you have figured out how they are getting the names to cold call? Does there appear to be a good lead on that?
We have a strong hunch. I think if we just do by reason of deduction, which I think you've done yourself, is there can only be a handful of people who can actually access this stuff. You're thinking about, you have to be in a specific division of the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency or the Department of Transportation where you're actually getting a live feed of those traffic accidents. There's only, when the police enter in that information, it's only going one place. And there's only a handful of people who see it at that level. Now, I know Plan Back in the past has used other means before. I don't believe, I believe this one's different, but in the past, auto body shops, tow truck drivers, etc., who are involved in the traffic accident process or in the medical field, ERs, possibility.
Somebody violating HIPAA and just sharing information. The key is how do they know that it's also somebody who hasn't been in a wreck before? And if it is somebody in law enforcement, that's probably something easy to pull up based on their driving record. So that way they can sort out the ones who've been in a wreck and who haven't. So that does make some sense. Also, somebody in the healthcare field, because they can say, have you ever been in a wreck before? The person says no. Now they know that's it. Now, before we go, where can our audience follow you, either through Lagniappe or various social social media platforms.
Yeah, you can find me on X, Scott Johnson or Johnson_Scott. I'll pull up. You can follow Lagniappe daily. Go to lagniappemobile.com. Become a subscriber. $1 for the first month. And you get access to everything we have. And you can read all the articles that I mentioned here.
Well, I appreciate it, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Johnson. That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to reporter Scott Johnson for joining us again. Stay safe, everyone.